everyone, this is part 1 of my crochet beginner series, learning how to make this bag. If you haven't watched the intro video, it is posted and I recommend you go watch that first. It shows you how to choose your yarn, choose your hook, and a couple other things that you might need for the project. But if you've already watched that, then we're going to get started crocheting. So just as a quick overview, in this part 1, we are going to be making the single crochet, and with that we're going to learn how to make our slip knot, we're going to learn how to chain, we're going to learn how to single crochet, and we're going to learn how to surface crochet as a bonus. So grab your yarn and your hook and let's get into it. I have this red heart ball of yarn. I feel like this is a pretty old skein. 226 grams. This has got to be old because it doesn't even say what size yarn it is. And I've got my 5mm hook here. We're going to get started with the first square of our bag. This is all the squares. The first stitch that you're going to learn is the single crochet stitch. This is the square. Here's the square without it being attached. When you crochet, you are starting with a loop and you're going to make a bunch of loops. Think like a brick. So you've laid 12 bricks side by side. Now you're going to start from this side and put one brick on top of each of the next bricks. And then you're going to put another brick. So you're working one brick at a time on your hook, building across, up and back like this. I want to mention that it's unlike knitting, where all of my bricks are on the hook. I have, let's say, 25 bricks here. All of them are on the hook right now. If I was crocheting, I would just have one loop, and you'll see that. You can maybe see that I have 15 bricks across, but I only have one brick on my hook. And so I'm going to build another brick, and then another brick. I have no idea if that makes sense, but that's how knitting is kind of different, is that crochet you're using one stitch at a time on your hook, and with knitting all of them are on your hook at once. So you've got your yarn. There are 2 ways to pull, and this skein actually kind of tells you to start pull yard end out from inside of this skein. So usually in a skein like this, there's a center pull. Oh, I found it. So if you just kind of like grab your fingers and try and find it, you might be able to find this end. Obviously I already pulled mine, but I would do that. Or there is an end on the outside. My end is probably under the label, so if you pull off your label, there's this end. So if you pull from the outside, your ball is gonna, roll away, and personally that is annoying to me. So if I can help it, I'll pull from the center. But it really doesn't matter, especially if you can't find the center easily. It's usually just, just start pulling from the outside. You're going to take your hook in your dominant hand, which is my right hand. So the first thing we need to do is to make a slip knot to get our chain started. There are many ways to make a slip knot, and it doesn't really matter which one you use, but this is the way I'm going to show you because I feel like it's the easiest on camera. With your yarn, you have a tail end and you have the working yarn end that is attached to your yarn. You're going to take the tail and you're going to stick your fingers out and you're going to drape it over your fingers. But we want a little bit longer of a tail, so we're going to pull and make it long. So now you have your working yarn in the front and your tail is behind your fingers. And you're going to pinch that yarn on your fingers. Then you're going to take your yarn, your tail, wrap it around, and cross it. And then pinch the cross down. Now we're going to grab our hook, and you're going to go underneath that first top right X, and you're going to grab the left X, which is our tail, if you can see, if it's stuck here. But we're grabbing our tail, because that's what we just put over there. We're going under the working yarn on the right, grabbing our tail, and you're going to pull the tail through and pull the loop off your fingers and then tighten. And that's your slip knot. As you can see, I probably didn't need that big of a tail. But what that prevents is accidentally pulling the tail through the loop, and then you just have a knot instead of a slip knot. So I'll show you one more time. Take your tail. So I'll make it shorter this time. I'll show you what can happen if it's too short. Tail is pointing up on your fingers. Wrap it around. Pinch it. See, I'm pinching the tail. I've got my X. Working yarn under, tail on top. So if I go under the right side and grab the tail, if I'm not careful, I'll pull the tail through, and then I'll just have a knot. We don't want a knot. So let's go back, try that again. So we've got the working yarn up, leading with the tail, under the working, grab the tail. So just make sure you're keeping the tail on the left side here, and the loop stays on the right side. So you can pull that loop off your fingers and tighten. And then the tail and the working yarn are on this side, and the loop is on this side of the knot. Hopefully that makes sense. We're going to go ahead and move on. So that was a slip knot. That's how we're going to start all of our squares. So in order to make a square, we need to create the foundation row, what we're going to build all of these bricks on. For this project, we need 16 foundation chains. The hardest part about crochet is how to hold the yarn in your hook. Some people crochet like this. I don't crochet like that. I crochet like this. This is more pencil. I guess you would call this like toddler pencil. I don't know. This is in my right hand, and the yarn is going to go in my left hand. I also want to just say that the chain row and the first row after that are also hard, just because there's not a whole lot to hold on to. Once you get past that point, it should be a little bit easier to grasp the work and to chain. So bear with me here. This is how I hold the yarn. We've got the working yarn over here. It goes over my 3 fingers and wrapped around my pointer finger. And this pinch, I'm pinching the yarn between my knuckles here. And that's going to help me control the tension, because tension's really the most important thing when making your stitches. Making sure that they're all even. You're going to pinch right there between your knuckles if you can. Or you just have to find some way that works for you to pinch that yarn. So like I said, the working yarn goes in front of my hand, and then I pinch it between my pointer and my middle, and then I wrap it around. So I can kind of use this pointer finger too. So pinch, wrap. Then I use this thumb and my middle finger to hold the work And also you can see these two fingers are also providing some tension on the yarn. So I've got two fingers here, pinching, pinch here, and then I use my middle and my thumb to grab the work. And the work at this point is simply this tiny knot that we just made. That's what you want to hold. So when we make our chains, it's going to look something like this. So we're going to be making these little fishtails. Each fishtail is one stitch, or a V, if you can see the V. I like to think of it as like a little fishtail. Each one of those is one chain. We're going to need to make 17 for our first block. So now that we kind of know what it looks like, the loop that is on your hook determines how big that little fishtail will be. So you want the loop to be just a little bit bigger than your hook. It should slide freely. So we're holding our yarn, pinching that knot. That's important. Otherwise, they're just going to be spinning around in circles. So you need to pinch the knot, and you don't want to grab the tail because then it makes the loop really tight. So you want to keep the knot in your fingers. You're going to take your hook in front of the yarn and around. And then to pull through, you're going to twist your hook downwards, catching the yarn. And then you can gently pull it through what's on your hook. And there is your first chain. So now this loop is going to be a little bit more free moving, and I encourage you to pull on your yarn and adjust the tension, adjusting the size of that loop. Okay, you want to try and make this loop the same size as the next loop. And you also want to be careful that you don't accidentally make this loop disappear by pulling on things too tight. So now you don't really need to hold the knot anymore. Now you're going to move your fingers up and hold that loop. And you're going to do the same thing. Hook in front, wrap it around, twist the hook towards you. And even at this point, you can adjust your yarn. And if you keep tension here after you've caught the yarn, it helps you pull it through. And that was 2. So now you should be able to see this was our first one. That was our second chain. Your third chain is currently on your hook. You haven't made it yet. So again, the loop that's on your hook becomes the next loop. So if I have a giant loop and I chain, now I have a giant chain, and we don't want that. You want to try and make your chains as equal as possible. So now I've moved my fingers up. I'm pinching again between the thumb and the middle finger. And I'm pinching my yarn. However you need to get it. However you need to hold it. Just make sure you're holding the work and holding the yarn. So you wrap your hook in front, pull through. That was 3, and then I move my fingers up. Hook in front, twist the hook towards me, pull through. That was 4. In front, hook goes in front of the yarn, then around the back, pull through. If you're having trouble getting it through the hole, you can also push the loop off with your finger. I do that sometimes. Or just hold the loop or pull down on your work, pull up on the hook, just to kind of make space. And look, don't be afraid to mess up. You can take it apart and try again at any point. That's the nice part about crochet, is that you only have one loop on the line at any point, so you can just take it out and try it again. You're not about to drop a whole stitch down a sweater. So if you mess up, it's okay. Don't worry about keeping count. You're going to learn to count each of these fishtails. And I really hope you can see it. So each stitch has 2 sides to it. But you can also just count the top bump if you want. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. The one on your hook does not count. You haven't made that stitch yet. So right now we have 8 chains. So we're going to make 8 more. In front, pull through. Hook in front, twist, pull through. Hook in front, twist, in front, twist, moving my fingers up as I go, in front, twist, in front, twist. So look, if I make one that I hate, and I don't like that one, okay, just pull it out, put your hook back in the loop, in front, twist, hook in front, around the back, twist and through, around the back, twist and through. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, and 17. So like I said, we need 17 chains. So for the single crochet stitch, it's not a very tall stitch. So we're actually going to be making 16 single crochets. And you may wonder, well, why did we chain 17 then? It's because the first one does not count as a stitch. The first one helps us get a little bit of space to make the first single crochet. So when you're making single crochets, you chain the amount that you want plus 1. And that 1 chain is actually a turning chain. So you can kind of think of it as like 16 across, and then the 1 kind of goes up. So we're going to go into our first stitch, which, like I said, we're skipping the first chain, which is this fishtail. Let me take this off my hook. This is the first chain, which means this is the second chain. So you're going to stick your hook from front to back. Holding your work is the key here. Through that stitch. And then you're going to take your hook under the yarn. Then you're going to twist your hook towards you and pull the yarn through that stitch. You should have 2 loops on your hook. And then we're going to do kind of like how we made a chain. You're going to stick your hook in front, wrap it around, turn it towards you, and you're going to pull it through 2 loops. So that's our first single crochet. Our next stitch is that next little bump. If you can see, this has our single crochet coming out of it. So we need to move to the next one. Stick your hook from front to back, going under the yarn, turning and catching it, and pulling it through. That is making the attachment in the next chain. And then we're going to yarn over, so hook goes in front, and pull through 2. And that's our second single crochet. So I'm going to take this out so we can see we have the rest of our chains to do. But here's our first single crochet, and this is our second one. And we should have 14 more. This is the stitch that we just made. You can see those 2 loops coming out of the hole there. We need to go into this stitch. So just into the top there, insert your hook, take your hook under, grab the yarn, and then hook in front, pull through 2. There's the third one. We're going to move to the fourth one, into the loop, hook under, grab the yarn, pull it through. Remember what I said, holding the work as close as you can to the stitch you're working on is key, I think. And so same here, you want to make sure these loops stay pretty even. So you don't want to pull that yarn too far through. You want to pull it so that it's level with the first loop. Yarn over, pull through 2. Same thing as this first loop that's on our hook right now, that becomes the top of our stitch. So you don't want it to be giant when you go into the next stitch. Because then you have a giant loop. So we're going to make our next stitch. And if you can see, now that we've made a couple, our single crochet has those two little legs there on each stitch. So insert into the next stitch, next chain I should say. You hook under, grab the yarn, pull it through. Then hook in front, grab the yarn, pull through 2. Next stitch, yarn over, pull through, yarn over, pull through 2. Next stitch, insert in, yarn over, pull through, yarn over, pull through 2. Yarn over, or insert into the next stitch, yarn over, pull through, yarn over, pull through 2. You're just going to keep doing that all the way down. So you can see I have 2 left. Insert in, pull through 2. And then my last one, insert in, pull through, yarn over, pull through 2. So that's our first row. And honestly, that was probably the hardest row. So since we chained 17 and the first stitch didn't count, we should have 16 stitches. And to count stitches, if you look on the top of your work here, there should be 2 teardrops. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, and the last one we just did, 16. So you should have 16. That was row 1. We're going to do 16 rows. So let's say you chained 17, and you know you chained 17, and you know you skipped the first stitch, and you started in the second stitch. That means you should have 16 at the end, but maybe you don't. Maybe you only have 15, or maybe you have 17. So what can happen is, let me do a few more stitches. What can happen is in the middle of the round, you might accidentally put an extra stitch in a chain that you've already done. So you can see maybe that this single crochet is in this hole. So I don't want to put a single crochet there. But if I accidentally do, now you could see that there are 2 single crochets in that one hole. That's called an increase. And while there are times when you want to do that, this isn't one of those times. So if you end up with more stitches, see if you accidentally added 2 stitches into one hole. Also, could accidentally skip a hole. So maybe I don't see this chain, or maybe one of your chains is really tiny and tight, then you might definitely skip it. So if I skip this chain, now I'm going to have 1 less stitch. This seems a bit harder to catch, especially in the chain row. If at the end of your row you end up with 15 stitches or 17 stitches, you can either try the row again, or you can just leave it and attempt to keep the same amount of stitches from there on out. Especially since the chain row is so difficult, I would say if you have 17 at the end of the chain row, just go with 17 for the rest of it. If you have 15 at the end of the chain row, go with 15 for the rest of it. With a single crochet, each row has a turning chain. So we're going to chain 1. So remember to chain, you just wrap your hook in the front and around the back, and then pull it through. Now you're going to take your work, turn it, so that all your stitches are back on the left side, so that we can work right to left. Remember all our teardrops? Make sure your yarn is in the back here. Our first stitch is right here. It's our 2 teardrops. So for all the rest of the rows, you're going to insert through 2 teardrops. The first row just didn't have that. So that's why we only inserted into the 1 loop. So you're going to insert your hook from front to back through both of those loops. You should have your teardrops on your hook. And then we're going to do the same thing. Hook under, pull the yarn through, yarn over, pull through 2. I feel like the stitches are much easier to see now, but turn it up if you need to, from back front to back through both of those teardrops. Pull through 2. Next stitch. Insert your hook, pull through 2. Okay, you guys, I actually did take a pause in the middle of that row. I really needed a break, but I do want to show you what you can do if you need to pause so that you don't unravel your work. So I actually just left it like that with my hook in it on the ground because I know no one's really going to mess with it. This is the loop that's important, so you could simply just make that loop big. That way, you know, it's going to take a bit of pulling until that stitch actually comes out. Or if you want to be really secure, you can do a couple things. This, or something like this with a closed loop, is going to be your safest. You're just going to hook it onto that loop. So this isn't going anywhere now if someone pulls on my yarn. And then when you're ready to use it again, you can just pull on your loop, take this off, and you're ready. This is essentially just a giant stitch marker. The little ones are exactly the same. They're just like half of the size. But if you don't have something like this, you could use an earring hoop. Same kind of idea there. Or of course, if you don't have an earring, you could use a bobby pin. This one's a little bit less secure because it could slide off the end, but honestly, that's pretty unlikely. Or a paper clip. So we're going to continue. As you can see, we're halfway through a row, and I wanted to make sure that I was clear about a couple things that maybe I didn't do so well explaining yesterday. I always feel like I'm doing a terrible job explaining. It is difficult to get some things across on video. The hardest thing being the tension of your yarn and where to hold the work. So if you're really struggling and things are twirling, just make sure you're holding your work straight as you work. So you should always be working right to left if you're right-handed. So some people start to get twisted, and you want your unfinished stuff over here. The stuff you've been working on should be kind of under your hand. So we're not really working up and down, we're more working right to left. Let's count our stitches. I'm going to use this. So 1, 2, because you can see the 2 little V's there. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now if you're thinking that this might be a stitch, because there's a V there, that's our chain. That was what we used to start the row, and that doesn't count as a stitch. So you're going to start here. And I'll show you in the next row how you can make sure that you don't accidentally count that as a stitch. But we have 1, 2, 3, 4. So that means we have 12 more single crochets to make. Into our next stitch, you can see there's our 2 teardrops. So you're going to insert your hook front to back through those stitches. And you should have just those 2 loops on your hook. Stick your hook under the yarn, grab it, and twist your hook towards you so that you catch that yarn. Pull it through. Now you have 2 loops on your hook. Then your hook is in front. Wrap it around the back, catch the yarn, and pull it through both loops. So there's our new stitch that we just made right there. So then remember, control your tension on that loop because this is the loop that becomes the next stitch. We're going to move to the next one. Remember, we're holding our yarn really however you can, but I hold my yarn in front of my 3 fingers, wrapped around my first finger, tension between the knuckles, and then pinched with my thumb and middle finger. So now we're going to stick our fingers, hold right under our next stitch, insert your hook under the yarn, twist it towards you, pull it through. 2 loops on your hook, hook in front, twist towards you, and through. Now, I want to show you something. So every time I go through the next stitch, so let's insert into the next stitch, I always take my hook under the yarn and pull it through. You could go over the yarn and pull it through. That does have a different effect on your stitch, kind of makes your yarn cross. But in reality, it really doesn't matter how you get the yarn through. Personally, I think it's faster to go under and pull it through rather than over and pull it through. And then same here, I like to go in front of the yarn and pull it through, but you could go, I think going behind is pretty hard to catch the yarn on this one. I'm pretty sure my mom goes behind and I have no idea how she does it. It's just really hard to get the yarn to catch, as you can see. So I always go in front of the yarn and pull it through. But if you're having trouble catching the yarn, try and grab it the other way. So we've got to finish this row here. So we're going to go into the next stitch, finding our next teardrop here. Insert, pull your loop through, yarn over, pull through 2. Next stitch, right under the top 2 loops, pull through, yarn over, pull through 2. Insert into the next stitch, pull through, yarn over, pull through 2. Next stitch, pull the yarn through, yarn over, pull through 2. Next stitch, yarn over, pull through, yarn over, pull through 2. And I usually honestly tighten this stitch after each one. I'm noticing I'll just kind of push and tighten things. You don't really have to do that, but remember, you control the tension. And if you don't like the stitch you just made, you can pull your hook out and stick your hook in the last stitch and then pull everything out. And now you can try again. How many stitches do we have left? 1, 2, 3, and 4. So let's finish those last 4 stitches. And the last one. So you came to the end. You should have sort of a straight edge here. And you should have a nice little rectangle forming. That was row 2. Okay, so what you should do right now is make sure you didn't skip any stitches or add any stitches. So we should have 16 of these loops. So let's count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. This loop doesn't count, obviously, that's our working loop. And remember, this over here on the end is our chain. So if you're confused about the chain and you're not sure if you're counting the chain, we're gonna mark our first stitch, and that should help. Remember, we chain 1, yarning over, pull the yarn through, and then we're gonna turn our work. You can turn your work away from you, or you can turn your work towards you. It doesn't really matter that much, but I found that when you turn away, the edge looks just a little bit nicer. So whichever you do, just make sure your yarn is in the back here and your work is now to the left of you again. So this little thing here, that's our chain. We're not going to worry about that. This is still our first stitch. The stitch we made final. So if you're confused about that too, when you make your final stitch of the row, so we just made our final stitch, before you make your chain, insert your little stitch marker of choice, do your chain 1, turn your work, and now you can see, okay, that's the final stitch of the last round, which means it's the first stitch of this round. So I'm going to just go ahead and take that out now. And that's where we insert our hook, into that first stitch. Same thing, yarn over, pull through. Yarn over, pull through 2. And that loop that just came off our hook is the first stitch. Sorry, it's a little bit blurry. So you can insert your stitch marker into that. So now you can see this is the first stitch. This little loopy on the side, that's our chain, and you don't really have to worry about the chain. The chain just makes it easier. It creates space for the next level, is what it does. And that might start to make a little bit more sense when we do our double crochet, but you don't have to really worry about it. Just know that the chain doesn't count as a stitch, but it starts the round. It creates space for the next level. So we've got our first stitch, we marked it, and now we're just going to do single crochets all the way across again, 15 more, till our last stitch. So I'm just going to do it slowly, talking you through. Every single row after this is the same until you get to 16 rows. So just spot your chains on the top, stick your hook through, pull your yarn through, yarn over, pull through 2. Next stitch, yarn over, pull through, yarn over, pull through 2. Insert your hook, pull through, yarn over, pull through 2. Again, keeping those 2 fingers pinching the work so that it's not just spinning around crazy. I even kind of hold it, I guess, with my other hand as well. Hook and work. That's the hardest part, is figuring out how you need to hold the yarn, but once you get that, it really kind of unlocks everything. It's not really the motion that's hard, it's just controlling the motion. Next stitch, pull through, yarn over, pull through 2. Insert your hook, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2. Insert your hook, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2. Pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2. Insert your hook, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2. Insert your hook, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2. Insert your hook, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2. Insert your hook, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2. Insert your hook, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2, insert your hook, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2, we've got 2 stitches left, insert, pull up a loop, pull through 2, last stitch, insert your hook, pull up a loop, yarn over, and pull through 2. And this is our chain. Don't be confused by that. So that was our first stitch we marked. So let's count from there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. And let's go ahead and mark that 16th stitch as well. I'd use another bobby pin, but I don't have one. So we're just gonna mark it with this big one. So what I would recommend, honestly, is to mark the first stitch that you make and the last stitch that you make until you feel confident that you're not going to mistake the chain for a stitch. Because what can happen is if I would accidentally put a stitch where that chain is, I would have 17 stitches. And then on the next round, I would accidentally put one in this chain and I would get 18 stitches. And you would end up accidentally making a triangle instead of a square. Another way to combat that is just always count how many stitches you have at the end of the round. Eventually, you kind of have enough confidence that you aren't skipping stitches, but I would really, really highly recommend that you count that you still have 16 stitches. If you don't have 16 stitches, maybe take out that last row and count the row before. Did you have 16 stitches in the row before? And if you had 16 stitches in that row, you should be good to try the next row again. If you already had more stitches in the row before, then you were kind of setting yourself up to mess up. Just do your best to try and keep a reasonable amount of stitches. 16. If you accidentally have 15, just try and stick with your 15 through the rest of it. Or if you accidentally have 17 now, try and keep it consistent as much as you can. It doesn't have to really be perfect, but try not to increase until you have like a giant row of 25 stitches. Okay, so that was row 3. 13 more rows of that. So remember, at the end of each row, you're going to chain 1, turn your work, and place your first stitch where that stitch marker is. Insert your hook, pull up a loop, and pull through 2. Okay, so I would go ahead and put my stitch marker, this loop that's in the back of your hook closest to your hand, that becomes our stitch. Oops. And we're going to put that stitch marker right back in. Now we know that's the first stitch and not that chain. And then we're just going to do all the way across until we put our last stitch where this stitch marker is. I'm going to do that on camera slowly. And we made it to our last stitch. Pull out your stitch marker. Put that last stitch in there. And then go ahead and mark that again if you feel like you need to. Chain 1, turn, and then put your stitch in that where that stitch marker was. Your first stitch. Go ahead and place your stitch marker again. And we're going to go across again and do the same thing until you have 16 rows. So right now I don't have a lot of rows, so it's kind of hard to count. But every 2 rows you get a ridge. And it is a bit hard to see, but this is 1 row. And here on the second row, you can see it has these little ridges. That's row 2. Row 3 does not have any ridges, but you can see row 4's ridges here. So 1, no ridge. Row 2 has 2 ridges. So I can see that this is 4. And that helps me count my rows. Now if I flip it over, you have to be careful because while every 2 rows has a ridge, on this side, row 1 has our ridges. And then row 2 doesn't have any ridges. Row 3 has ridges. So if I started counting on this side, I would have to start at 1, 3, 5, 7, 9. And I'll show you that once again once I get, 5 or 6 more rows. So once again, you're just going to keep working back and forth, counting to make sure you have 16 each time you do a row, and using your stitch markers on the first and the last stitch to make sure that you're not counting our turning chain as a stitch. So after each row, chain 1, turn, and then 16 more single crochets. You might be able to see the ridges now. Here are the ridges. Oh, ridges, 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 ridges. So as you can see, I'm on the odd side because this ridge is very close to the bottom. So that's 1 row, 2, 3 rows, 4, 5 rows, 6, 7 rows, 8, 9, 10, 11. And then I only have 1 more row next. That makes I have 12 rows right now. Of course, you could also just do a row and place a tally mark, which I might also recommend you do. So test your counting abilities, but also have the row count next to you so you can know, okay, yeah, I do have 12 rows, and let me try and count and see if I can identify the 12 rows, because it's really helpful to be able to see what your work is. That way, if you do forget, you can kind of count it out. So I have 4 more rows. I'm going to go ahead and do those. So I'm just finishing up my last row of stitches here. That's my last stitch. Pull through 2. And let's go ahead and count and make sure we still have 16 across. Can you guys see the 16? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. That little nub is our chain. So we have 16 still. And then let's count and see if we have 16 rows. It looks pretty square, so we should be pretty good. But let's see. So here's our first row of ridges. That's row 1. So 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, and there's the 16th row. That is all 16 rows. Yours may not look as tight as this, it might have some holes, but that is totally fine. If you have something that resembles even slightly this, that's good. You've made a single crochet block. Of course, you're welcome to repeat the video and try again, because sometimes things click better the second time and your tension might get better. Especially if you think that your tension started to get better near the end of the block, you could try again and you might end up getting a more even tension, more consistent block. That's really up to you. You're gonna get tons of practice throughout this series, so whatever you want to do. But of course the next video won't come out for 2 more days, so that's plenty of time to practice this square. The single crochet is a very important stitch. We're going to be using the single crochet in a lot of our other blocks to make cool designs, but this is the first of the 4 core stitches. So to finish off our block, we've got our hook here. To finish off really anything, what I do is I chain 1, keep my hook on, and then I'm going to cut the yarn. But you want to cut the yarn about 2 lengths of your square, because we're going to use this tail to sew the squares together later. So just cut a generous tail. So I'm going to cut right here, and then you're going to take that loop on your hook and pull the yarn through, and then you can just tighten that, and it's perfectly secure and nothing is going anywhere. We're going to hide the ends later. This is our first square of the bag complete. 16 rows of 16 single crochets. Finished square measures 3 3/4 inches by 4 1/4 inches. The nice part is that it's stretchy. It does not have to be a perfect square, just something sort of like a square will work. That's the size of my square. Your square does not have to be exactly that size. Just keep in mind that you want all of your squares to be roughly the same size for the project. For a bonus, I want to show you how to surface crochet. I want to add a little bit of spice to your block. Now, I highly recommend you use a different color for this so that it stands out. If you don't have a different color, you can try it with the same color, but it's actually really easy. We haven't actually really learned slip stitch yet. It's kind of like the stitch below a single crochet. I don't really use it a lot. There are certain cases that we're going to use it in the series, but I don't think there was a whole video needed to be dedicated to it. People definitely make slip stitch blankets and slip stitch scarves, but it's just such a short stitch that it takes forever. This is a slip stitch. It's just not going to be the way you would do it in a row. But anyway, so you're going to take your yarn, you're going to put it behind the work here, and this is the front of my work. I'm going to stick my hook through and grab the yarn and pull just the loop. So I'm sorry, this is a dark yarn, but I have my loop, and you're going to leave a generous tail so that you don't accidentally pull that through. So really all you do is you're going to do the same thing. Stick your hook down. You want to try and keep it pretty close. Grab that yarn, the working yarn, pull it through and through the loop on your hook. And it should have made a little loop. Now if I go like this and pull through, you can totally do that. It's just giant. And I can go small again, so I have a loop on my hook. I'm sticking my hook through the work to the back, grabbing my working yarn, pulling it through, and then through the loop on my hook. And so I can do that, and you can make patterns on top of your work. You can put letters, you can do like a little flower if you can figure that out, but it's really quite easy. You just, stick your hook through, grab the working yarn, pull it through the work and through the loop on your hook. So there's no really extra yarn overs or anything with the slip stitch. So that is surface crochet. So I have grabbed a different color that's easier to see just so that I could show you making a slip stitch design. And I'm actually just going to take this Sharpie and draw my design on here. I want to have a little heart. And if I don't like it, I'm just going to end up using the other side for the outside of the bag. So there's my heart. You do not have to do that. I just figured it might be easier for you to understand what's going on. Tail on the back. And I'm going to start here and just follow what I've laid out. I'm trying to keep my stitches as small and as even as possible, especially as I do these curves. Honestly, here's what you should do. Instead of doing it on the front, here's my new idea. I'm going to use that as the guideline for the back, which is going to be, harder, but it won't be ugly. Oh, it's going to be way harder to figure out where I need to put my hook, but I kind of roughly know, but just making sure it matches up on the back and then pulling through. This is definitely way harder, but like I said, I'm not going to have the Sharpie on the front. Or you could just go for it and not draw at all, but just going through doing our slip stitches on the surface of our work. So I'm going to keep going around, and hopefully I have something that looks like a heart when we're done. So I'm coming up on the end, and I'm just going to do the last few connection slip stitches and just end right over top of that. And then to finish it, you're going to cut your yarn, pull it through, and then what you can do is stick your hook up through the back and grab the tail and pull it down through. And you can do some adjustments. My heart is definitely not perfect, but I think it's cute. That's your surface crochet. And what you're going to do with these is you're just going to leave them, and I will show you how to weave them in, like I said, near the end. So there's our surface crochet heart. Please leave any questions that you have in the comments. Please give this video a thumbs up, subscribe, and make sure that you stay tuned for the part 2 video coming in 2 days. The block we just made on our bag is this bottom block. Thank you so much for watching.